Hi, I'm Barry Simon. Welcome to episode 5 of Conversations for Peace. As you know, over our episodes, we've been showing you various organizations and programs going on in the Middle East, primarily in Israel and the West Bank, that are providing opportunities for the possibility of peace to exist. And yet, every day, especially recently again, we're seeing missiles flying from Gaza, bombs coming from Israel, and more devastation for people on both sides. You know, right here in the States, we still have continually high school shootings taking place, or shootings in synagogues and churches and mosques. The willingness for people to commit violence versus have the headlines be all about creating a world of possibility and peace and cooperation, those kinds of headlines hardly exist at all. And yet that's what we're here to continue to support, the possibility of a world that works for everyone with no one left behind. In this episode, we'll be talking to Vivian Silver of the Women Wage Peace movement that we've seen pieces of in previous episodes.
I just have to warn you that we just got a security warning. I live right on the border of the Gaza Strip. I don't expect anything to happen, but I may have to run to my shelter, so we'll have to take a break. It's really crazy. At least they told us today. Yesterday, there was so much bombing, so much noise, and nobody was saying anything. We are made up of religious and secular. We're made up of right wing, center, and left. We have set women as part of the movement, which is extraordinary. We have very different ideas about what the solution could be or should be, but we all agree on the one point that it has to be a political solution. Our goal here is to convince the people, create a critical mass of people in Israel who will pressure the government, because we believe that a political solution is the only way we're going to achieve security both in Israel and in Palestine. Women Wage Peace has proposed a bill that will hopefully be turned into law that calls for political alternatives first. In other words, before the Israeli cabinet or government makes a decision to go to war, they will be obligated to consider and examine various political alternatives. We can all live together a beautiful life in this country, as long as our neighbors are also related to with dignity and self-determination. So we all deserve the same, and we all deserve better than we have now.
We shall live in peace today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe.
The work of Women Wage Peace continues. The legislation in the Knesset in Israel to forward the possibility of peace and cooperation among all people, ending this occupation as soon as possible. I also had the opportunity to review the possibility of peace in the Middle East with Joel Braunhold, the executive director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Tell me a little bit about the Alliance for Middle East Peace, if you would.
Sure. ALMEP is a network of over 100 groups working on the ground in Israel and Palestine, building relationships between Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians, from after-school programs to agricultural cooperatives, high-tech to sports. We have groups working in every societal vertical, trying to create virtuous cycles instead of vicious circles. We lobby the US government, other governments. We work with private philanthropy to get them to increase the amount of money they're giving into the space. How do we make sure that this work is not seen as nice, but as necessary? And how can we convince policymakers to take it necessarily and give them the tools that they would need in order to invest if they do believe it's necessary? And we've been pushing for the past decade to create an international fund for Israeli-Palestinian peace, modeled off a successful international fund for Ireland. And we've been doing a lot of policy work towards that as well. We're going to have a conversation about what does a political scenario, how can we deliver rights? If one side believes the other side is out just to kill them, which is what both populations currently believe of the other, either to take their land or to kill them, you can't advance the conversation. That doesn't mean that these conversations are namby-pamby, it's have hummus and go home or hugging. It needs to be hard and complicated and difficult and uncomfortable. And it needs to lead to action, these levels of fear and mistrust, especially amongst the youth.
Are the youth more mistrusting, or is there more movement among younger generations to, come on, let's get over this?
No. So Israel and Palestine is the only place in the world that the younger you get, the worse it gets. So they are, because of their lived experience of, your average age in Israel is 33, in the West Bank it's 20, in Gaza it's 16. So when you track their lives against the conflict, you get why they're less optimistic than their parents. When it comes to peace building, it's not just about moving people off like a valence policy about how much water they consume. This is like core about, blood and sand and like family and like the hardest stuff that we care about. It's a reason that in many religious traditions, blessed are the peacemakers, because it's a recognition of how difficult it is.
Thank you for your commitment with the Alliance for Middle East Peace to creating an avenue through school, through programs, through other assistance, through other organizations and philanthropic efforts that you're bringing to the table to promote this possibility of a world that works for everyone through your stand and the Alliance's stand for the possibility of peace throughout the Middle East. Well, I also had the pleasure of talking with Ani Zonneveld, the founder of the organization called Muslims for Progressive Values. I never knew such an organization even existed. I'm thrilled to know that that organization does exist, and Ani's commitment to furthering the understanding of Muslims beyond what's in the press, beyond the sense that all Muslims are filled with hate and just want to kill everyone who's not a Muslim. That is not Islam, and that is not certainly the Muslim world that Ani knows and loves and appreciates and shares with us. Really thrilled to have Frej Finish with us today. Frej has dedicated his entire career to human rights since the age of 20. He's been with the UN Agency for Asia Pacific, Middle East, and North Africa branch at the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, headquartered in Geneva. He's originally from Tunisia. He's worked with many organizations in many countries to create the possibility of peace and promote human rights throughout the world. What do you see possible in the Middle East, especially in particular in the Israel and Palestinian area, if there was more peace, understanding, and cooperation among all people?
Everything will be possible, I think. If we have peace, we have mutual understanding between the two peoples, everything will be possible. For example, more development, less death, more happiness, more freedom, more cooperation, and in particular peace, of course. If it's limited to the two populations or two communities, this will be very simple to find a solution to it. And if you ask people from Israel or from Palestine, they will tell you, we want peace and we are ready to make peace. The problem is somewhere else. And in particular, I think, the fact that the government of Israel doesn't recognize the right of Palestinian people to self-determination, to have their own state, or to find a solution. Before 47, 48, these two communities, and in addition to Christians, they were living in peace. Right. And they were living together. There was no wall. There was no separation.
What do you see it would take to begin a more amicable evolution?
Oh, maybe to start with the change of the leadership, of the existing leadership in the region, including in Israel. Now, Israel is governed by military, and the population is also militarized. So everybody is from a military point of view. And this will not be possible unless people will make it. Normal people will make it, not the leaderships. Right. From both sides.
I have a lot of progressive Reform Jewish rabbi friends, and what they've been doing for some years is to basically create a Reform Judaism in Israel as a way to change the mindsets. Now, Frej was saying how this is not a sacred thing, but obviously it has been made into a sacred framing, unfortunately. And so what the Reform Jewish rabbis are doing is to to change that mindset from a religious perspective. So yes, it needs to be political, it needs to be demilitarization, but it also needs to have that element of religiosity taken out of it. And by promoting the Reform Judaism in Israel, which is not recognized by the state of Israel, I think they are going to be playing an element because they are influencing Israelis themselves in how we can't claim to be Jewish and then be discriminating against a bunch of another group of human beings. It's unacceptable from a Jewish tradition.
Did Arafat make a mistake by not agreeing to what he could have agreed to when he could have agreed to something?
I met Arafat 4 or 5 times in my life. In Tunisia first, and then in Gaza and also in Ramallah. I think he's the Mandela for Palestine, and we lost him. Israel lost Arafat. And to go back to your first question about it may happen or not, it will happen when you have a Mandela from Palestine and a de Klerk from Israel.
Yes. Yeah.
This may happen. Right. And this is the only solution.
Right.
And you have experience. South Africa, apartheid. And they found a solution to live together. And they are living together today.
As you heard from Frej, the possibility of leadership that guides the people towards a resolution of this ongoing situation is really essential. There is no solid leader among the Palestinians and that's geared towards peacemaking, and I personally do not find Mr. Netanyahu to be geared and committed towards peacemaking. Both sides have their heels dug in. Annie pointed out that the Israeli government does not treat Reform Jews the same way they treat other Jews in Israel. And that's an interesting point. Similarly, the media does not seek the opinions of the progressive Muslim community, rather choosing to focus on the darkest side of the Muslim community, and I think that's unfortunate. Annie Zonneveld with the Muslims for Progressive Values organization is really bringing a new view of Muslims and the Muslim community to the world. Most of us only know Muslims because of the headlines, which are usually because of a Muslim who did a bombing or did an atrocity here or there or blew themselves up somewhere. We're painting with a broad brush that all Muslims, all of Islam, is this hate-filled religion out to kill everyone who is not Muslim. So thank you, Annie, for the work that you're doing to educate the rest of the world of the beauty of Islam. So that's episode 5 of today's Conversations for Peace. And I really want to thank you for continuing to watch our episodes. Please tell your friends. Please share our episodes with your friends via Facebook, the website, go on Instagram. We're out there. If you have an interest in our organization or myself coming to you speak at your organization, let me know. Thanks again for continuing to stand for the possibility of a world that works for everyone. And coming together, we will create a tipping point. In episode 6 and beyond, we'll take our conversations beyond the Middle East. We'll talk about the effects of our views here in the U.S. or other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So stay tuned for those episodes where we'll be hearing from the women that created the first Muslim sorority in the U.S. We'll be hearing from a rapper artist in Times Square about his views of what's possible when people begin to communicate with each other. So I invite you to go out in your day today. Talk to someone today that you would never likely talk to in the past. Open up an avenue of communication that you've perhaps wanted open or that you've resisted opening, and open that line of communication. It can't hurt.